weather is obviously really important for Austin to expect Groudon to make an appearance. And so, yeah, we'll have to see. But so much about this is kind of the weather war and then also the main Dynamax option and how they match up against each other.
Zacian is Stefan's second restricted pair on his team there. So Zacian does struggle somewhat against Charizard and Groudon, both being able to hit him super effectively. So you wonder the viability of it. Is this one of those matchups which you only really need one restricted and your other 3 supportives can really help?
That's a great question. I think you could definitely make an argument for it. So we're going to see the Grim and the Zapdos. I think this is just such a consistent lead. And so Battle of the Grimmsnarls here. This has been one of the most dominant Pokemon in VGC in Series 12 because of the amount of supportability that it has. And so this is interesting, right? Because yes, Zapdos does pressure the Venusaur with a max airstream, but we know that there's weakness policy on the Venusaur that can actually be pretty scary here.
That was a quick lock-in of turn 1. These two, remember, they were the first 2 that played in top 8, so they have actually had a little bit of time to prep for this match. So they understood what their turn 1 lead was going to be and what their plan was of their course of action. And for Austin, that is Gigantamax Venusaur here on turn 1. Potential G-Max Vine Lashes or Max Quakes, whatever he wants to go for on this turn can really help his team out. What also helps is setting up Light Screen because that's going to help against special attacks. But Eerie Impulse revealed by Zapdos, lowering Venusaur's special attack by 2 stages. So this Max Quake into the Grimmsnarl on Stefan's end is hardly going to do any damage, and now you're locked into G-Max. Either you switch out and waste your G-Max, or you're just going to do no damage.
Oh, the Eerie Impulse here is so cool. You know, normally with Zapdos, a lot of the sets on these Zacian Kyogre teams, and look at that Spirit Break damage on a Grimmsnarl so much, but to continue my point, with Zapdos, a lot of players like to run Life Orb, you know, max special attack, max speed. You just run Hurricane, Heat Wave, for example, Thunderbolt Protect. This is an Eerie Impulse Zapdos, and it's still faster than the Venusaur. So that's such a critical deal in this matchup, and I don't think Stefan had really revealed that previously. And so huge tech here to give him a major advantage to start off this game.
Grimmsnarl on Stefan's end this turn will go for the Light Screen of his own, so that is going to help just as much as the Eerie Impulse did the previous turn. Now the special attack's going to do even less. Thunderbolt into Grimmsnarl does not knock it out, and the Venusaur now realizing I'm best at just lowering the speed of my opponent's Pokemon. With the critical hit, that's actually pretty big that he crit the Max Strike on that turn. He will lower the speed of both the Grimmsnarl and the Zapdos there. Grimmsnarl from Austin's side with the Spirit Break, super effective into Grimmsnarl and knocking it out.
Yeah, the critical hit there means that Grimmsnarl will faint if the crit doesn't happen there. It likely sticks on the field for a little bit longer, especially because you had both screens up at that point. But I don't think Stefan's necessarily upset about that because it is a free switch into Zacian. However, what can be a little bit scary right now is that Austin's Grimmsnarl has hung around for a little bit longer, right? So it can pressure the Zacian slot right now with some speed control. So if you're Stefan, maybe you just protect it and then Thunderbolt to get rid of the Grimmsnarl. Austin here has not Vine Lash yet, so that's actually one of the advantages for him. He's actually staggered his G-Max Vine Lash really well, and you know, you do risk getting knocked out here, right? Zacian can just go for Behemoth Blade. We see the Dynamax on Zapdos here, so you could just go for Max Airstream, Behemoth Blade, double up onto the Venusaur slot. But if you've got speed control on the Grim, you know, before Venusaur faints, and you do get that Vine Lash off, that at least helps you out going into this end game.
Zapdos is finally ready to Dynamax here on turn 3 of this game, and it has access to Max Airstream, which would be super effective into the Venusaur. The Grimmsnarl is also low health, so any attack towards that slot would be stopping it. The Scary Face, though, from Grimmsnarl, no matter how slow it is, it does have Prankster, so we'll go first and lower the speed of Zacian to be very slow now, losing 2 stages of its speed stat there. The Vine Lash does no damage, but more importantly, it will set up the residual damage at the end of each turn. So as this Max Airstream goes into the Grimmsnarl to knock it out, that will somewhat negate the Scary Face, but not fully, because remember, we had a Max Strike, and then we had the Scary Face.
Absolutely, and so Vine Lash at least does go up now. Yeah, there is a Behemoth Blade coming out, so this endgame's really interesting, right? Because Stefan now has put himself in a position where, like, Max Airstream next to, and oh my goodness!
Whoa!
that's just the Zacian diff in this format. It's just so powerful with Behemoth Blade, and you know, Venusaur has a little bit of bulk here, but not enough certainly to survive. So The upside is that you have Mind Lash, but the downside is you're down to your final 2 Pokemon, right? So you'd expect Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and Groudon. And so, like you notably called out, the Max Airstream does negate the Max Strike boost, but Calyrex actually is still going to be faster. However, the downside for Austin now is that you've lost the Weather War, and there is the Kyogre waiting in the back to just come out and, quick a Water type attack later on. And so Zacian here also, getting that speed boost, so you can just pressure with the Behemoth Blade. And at this point, if you KO the Calyrex Shadow Rider, Kyogre can obviously just win against Groudon. I guess one thing, the dynamic here is we don't necessarily know who's faster between the Groudon and the Kyogre, but both players have some sense of, how much speed investment they have, and so they should have some expectation of who's going to actually be faster.
The Zapdos does still have 2 more Dynamax attacks left in it for Stefan here in Game 1, so you can either go for more Max Airstreams just to try to build up that speed again, or you go for a Max Lightning into the Calyrex slot. But for this turn, Stefan will switch in the Kyogre to that Zacian slot because there's nothing Austin can do to stop the Drizzle. He is now going to be stuck in the rain for the remainder of this match. The Psychic Attack into Zapdos is not enough, and then a Max Airstream to Calyrex only does about 40% towards it there. So I actually, kind of forgot that the light screens are actually still in effect from those Grimmsnarls earlier on in the match, and then the Rock Slide also doesn't do too much thanks to the Grimmsnarls' help from before.
Yeah, that's like a game-winning play for Stefan, though. I guess it's not 100% over yet, but he basically managed to get Kyogre in and give it a speed boost via Max Airstream. Stefan's Kyogre is really bulky here, so I actually wouldn't have been surprised if it were slower than Groudon, and there's not too much that Austin can do to get around it. One thing that Stefan could have, been punished by is if he stayed in with the Zacian, so Calyrex now recognizing, okay, I'm going to fade to a Water type attack. I got to protect and try to press this Blades to Kyogre and maybe hope for a miss from Origin Pulse.
Max Airstream into the Protect on Calyrex's end, so it does not do too much damage. It will, however, give yet another speed boost to both of Stefan's Pokemon there. So now with this very speedy Kyogre clicking Water Spout at, very high full HP, it is going into the Groudon. The Protect's not going to help it there, but Groudon is going to take a lot. Not enough to knock it out fully, though, and now eating its berry, actually, so it's going to recover up some of its HP thanks to the Citrus Berry. Precipice Blades, it can only connect onto one. The answer is it will connect onto Kyogre there. Not enough for a knockout, though.
Yeah, without it being able to pick up a KO, Kyogre now is going to be able to get another attack off, right? So Calyrex is down to very low HP. You'd imagine that Groudon here wants to angle for a Protect to let the Vine Lash, finish off the game here, or finish off the Kyogre, I should say. So there's still a Zacian in the back. What actually becomes interesting here is if you get a double Protect, right? Like, Groudon was actually able to hang on from that Water Spout, which was really, really critical. That's where Vine Lash actually has so much of an impact in this matchup as well. So yeah, it goes to show in this Weather War, just because Kyogre has the rain up doesn't necessarily mean it'll guarantee the knockout. Zacian is obviously just waiting to come out as well. We're not actually going to see anything like a double Protect. It's just going to be the Hurricane coming out, and that's not going to KO Calyrex. Origin Pulse can miss here, but it double connects.
Wow, hanging on with 3 HP, but it's not going to matter there as Calyrex and Groudon will both get knocked out. Would have been a nice survival there for Calyrex, but ultimately not mattering in the grand scheme of things against Stefan's team. And now he is 1 win away from moving on to the finals here in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I mean, I think that endgame was very much in Stefan's favor. The only thing maybe you can go for is like a double Protect with Calyrex into a hoping for Origin Pulse miss, Rock Slide, gets the KO with Zapdos after Vine Lash, and then it's a 2v1 against Calyrex. Even then it can still be, or against Zacian, but even then it's still tricky. So I think the main thing that won that last game was the Zapdos set. It had Eerie Impulse, and it's still faster than the Venusaur. And so now Austin's like, oh man, you have Eerie Impulse, okay? Venusaur is not exactly a very effective max option, especially if I'm getting Eerie Impulse on turn 1. I just do no damage, and so he's got to be thinking about adjustments to the Zapdos now.
I'm also thinking about the matching Light Clay Grimmsnarls in this matchup, as if they're able to just set up Light Screen and Reflect, they've kind of done their job at that point. And barring critical hits, we did see the 1 crit onto the Grimmsnarl, which ended up mattering. If you're not able to output as much damage as you really need to, say as Austin with your Groudon or with your Dynamax Venusaur, if it's behind a Light Screen, that's really problematic to your win condition.
Yeah, so, if you're expecting Grimm and Zapdos again, like this Zapdos is a little bit bulkier, and because it's running your Impulse as well, right? And so I'm thinking from Austin's end, what if you just eliminate the Grimmsnarl immediately, like get rid of that. The only problem is Zapdos is not only good defensively, it's actually such a good Dynamax option here as well. It's one of those scenarios where it doesn't necessarily need to do a ton of damage because the Airstream boosts onto Kyogre and Zacian alone are so valuable, right? So like Austin could go for something like Instinct and the max option and, you know, try to like double up onto Grim immediately, but then, you know, if you pick up a knockout onto that, where do you really go? And so it's tricky, right? I think the Zapdos alone is actually so incredible in this matchup. Groudon is what I would look to because that's the only thing that can't really be affected by Eerie Impulse, but it's tricky to feel confident with Groudon because there, of course, is the Kyogre in the back. So you could maybe angle towards like Swords Dancing on Groudon immediately and then putting Stefan in a position where he can't get Kyogre out safely and then would have to like sacrifice something. And then from Austin's end, right, then you can use like the Scary Face from your Grimmsnarl, and even after a single special defense boost on a light screen, Groudon can actually provide so much value. But it is just going to be back to Venusaur.
Yep, Grimmsnarl and Zapdos is the lead for Stefan, and Venusaur Grimmsnarl on the other end for Austin. Looking at this turn, no, you know, the Zapdos, or excuse me, the Zacian switched out, the Grimmsnarl, once he gets the job, he gets knocked out. Is it better to Scary Face the Zapdos because that's the one that's going to be trying to max Airstream?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting consideration. I think the tough thing is like, even if like you Scary Face it this turn, if you max Venusaur, okay, no max at all, so maybe something like a Sleep Powder coming out this time around.
Light screen from Austin's Grimmsnarl. Does Stefan match? The answer is yes. So now for the next 8 turns, any special attacks will have their damage cut in half. Eerie Impulse into the Venusaur there. That's why you don't Dynamax again, because Austin already fell for that.
Oh, there it is.
There's the 75% chance. Sleep Powder into the Grimmsnarl, and now because it has to be left alone the next, or has to be put to sleep next turn, you can leave it alone and just not worry about that slot.
Yeah, so you know, I like Austin's adjustment here, right? Sometimes you don't have to necessarily fix the lead; you can just fix the turn 1 play. And so the idea is, okay, if I get Light Screen up there, even if Zapdos Dynamaxes and max Airstreams me, maybe the Venusaur can actually survive. Then it would actually activate Weakness Policy. Then the next one you could go for, I don't know, something like a Scary Face and Vine Lash. So the idea there, though, is to just not commit your Dynamax early because you know you're not getting very much damage output from it. And as you called out, the Grimmsnarl slot at Stefan's end is completely useless this turn, and Venusaur now not being able to put out very much damage is going to switch into Groudon. And I like this approach, right? Because now you've trapped kind of Stefan in, and if it doesn't, the Grimm doesn't switch out into Kyogre immediately, Swords Dance this next turn looks so strong.
Looks like there are no switches and no Dynamax either, as this Thunderbolt will go into the Grimmsnarl, not even doing too much damage to it thanks to the light screen. Here is the Spirit Break, though, into the Zapdos, doing pretty much the same amount of damage back, but also getting a special attack drop because of the Spirit Break. That's that's going to be helping him. If he keeps Spirit Breaking it, he'll eventually even out with those Eerie Impulses lowering the special attacks.
Exactly, and this is an amazing adjustment by Austin because you've gotten Groudon in safely. Zapdos does nothing against these 2 Pokemon right now, so you're free to go for a Swords Dance with Groudon. And if you look at Stefan's Pokemon, there's nothing on that slot that takes a Max Quake, as Grimmsnarl takes another turn to sleep as well. So the thing is now, okay, we're actually going to see Precipice Blaze rather than Swords Dance, maybe just covering for a Zacian switch out. I think Swords Dance there would have been a really powerful option, to be honest, because then you can Dynamax it. Now you do get the knockout into Grimm, but it does awkwardly allow Kyogre to come out.
Yeah, you're essentially helping Stefan out. The Grimmsnarl was somewhat of a dead weight at that point.
Exactly.
He's asleep. He's not really having any pressure that he can output, and by not Swords Dancing, maybe that's why he didn't want to Swords Dance, because he knows eventually I'm going to have to switch the Groudon out anyway, so why waste my time getting set up when I'm going to have to lose those boosts on my way out?
Yeah, I think there are multiple approaches you could take there. The reason to not Swords Dance is exactly as you described. Just get a knockout, get an early lead, and then conserve the Groudon for later. What I was thinking is, okay, well, you can set up Light Screen with the Grimmsnarl. Groudon Swords Dance is there. The next turn, Max Quake into the Grimmsnarl slot is so free, right? It either KOs Grimm or a Kyogre or Zacian switch in, and then you get a special defense boost with Light Screen, and you still have your Citrus Berry as well. So Austin instead taking the route to, not go for the Swords Dance, and let's see how this turn plays out.
Yep, no switches either.
Yeah.
So Groudon is actually doubling down, saying, I'm not afraid of this Kyogre. I'm ready to Dynamax in this matchup. I'm going to gain double the HP here and have access to these very strong base power moves like Max Quake, potentially a Max Flare to set the sun back up, and Stefan is responding in kind with a Dynamax of his own. Is it the Zapdos or the Kyogre? They're both viable candidates, but what we saw in Game 1 was that the Zapdos was really integral. Instead here, switching it up Game 2, what more can you ask for any of the Hoenn era Pokemon fans of a Dynamax Kyogre versus a Dynamax Groudon?
Very notably, Groudon actually Dynamaxing before the Kyogre here, so the Scary Face goes on to it, but in the end, it's actually not super relevant here, but makes sense just to guarantee because you don't know whether or not you're faster, right? So now you know. Hurricane comes out and there's the confusion!
There's a confusion! Hurricane 100%
no.
accurate because of the rain. This is all up to ground on the
And it hits itself in confusion!
And he doesn't come through. Max Geyser will go into that slide, and that is disastrous for Austin.
Oh my goodness, that's going to be a full-powered Max Geyser to get the one-hit knockout on a ground on an absolutely brutal turn there with the critical hit to boot as well. And everything just goes wrong there. It's going to be actually really difficult, I think, to come back after that. You can't bring out Venusaur and pressure with Sleep Powder, but the weather control no longer exists, and Zapdos now looking like it's in a really solid spot. There's still Calyrex, Shadow Rider, After Barrage pressure in the late game, so it's definitely not over yet. I think it feels really bad to experience that turn. Obviously, Hurricane confusion into full confusion, and then into the critical hit as well. It's just so mentally crushing, but you can't give up here. And with Venusaur having Sleep Powder, there is still a way.
Yeah, you can't falter like that if you're Austin. You've made it to top 4. Presumably, you've been hit by crits, you've been hit by flinches, you've been hit by sleeps and, and confusion and things on your way to top 4. So you can't give up now just because that turn did not go your way. The Zapdos is going to switch out into Zacian for Stefan, so he's now revealed all 4 of his Pokemon he brought here in this matchup. Going to get the attack boost thanks to its Intrepid sword, holding the sword there, giving it an attack boost. Scary Face though into the Zacian as he switches in, so he's already going to be really slow. And Sleep Powder does connect onto that Dynamax Kyogre, so now Kyogre is forced to be asleep next turn, and there's only a chance that it wakes up on the next turn of its last turn of Dynamax.
So basically, Austin's path to victory is putting everything to sleep and then getting the Calyrex out and just clicking Astral Barrage, Astral Barrage, Astral Barrage. Right now, it's really scary, but because at any point, any of these Pokemon can wake up, and because the Venusaur is actually moving before Kyogre and Zacian, you burn a turn of sleep immediately. So it's definitely really tricky, but it's not a guaranteed loss yet, right? And with the Sleep Powder, there's definitely a way, but Zapdos is actually going to switch back in.
Yeah, Zacian has to switch out there to negate the speed drops it took on the previous turn from a Scary Face. Reflect from Grimmsnarl, that's really important because it's going to be up for the rest of the game, stopping those physical attacks. Leaf Storm doesn't do too much damage to Kyogre, and it also lowers Venusaur's special attack by 2 stages there, so not very helpful for Austin. At this point, you're going to have to try to switch Venusaur out to reset those stat drops.
I really like the decision of Leaf Storm there, though, calling out the potential Protect on Zacian, and the thing is, Austin recognizes, how am I actually going to beat Kyogre? It's Assault Vest. I need to get damage onto it for this late game. Here's Hurricane just coming out, though. Of course, the light screen is still up, so Venusaur will be able to survive with the sliver of HP. There's another confusion, though.
Does it get confused? Because if it does, that's going to be really tough for Austin to come back from. Has the weakness policy boost. Is it going to break through?
Oh, it does!
It does break
Weather
through.
Ball!
Oh, it actually clicked the Weather Ball. The rain is up, so it's actually going to turn it into a water attack. Getting a little buff from having the rain up, but not the best option, especially at -2 special attack. Now the Spirit Break will go towards the Kyogre.
Kyogre does wake up, though.
Finally able to wake up. This Water Spout is not a full HP anymore, though, so it will do less damage. Venusaur even hangs on. Grimmsnarl takes that pretty well. Light Screen is still up at this point for both of these trainers.
Right now, there is the threat of late game Calyrex Shadow Rider, right? And the Weather Ball there actually is able to damage Zapdos. Grimmsnarl does have the speed control, and because of the Hurricane activating the weakness policy, Venusaur is actually doing decent damage once again. So Scary Face here to ensure that the Venusaur can get another attack off before the Zapdos can move.
Yep, Zapdos has been lowered. It's that this confusion is a
and
really,
it attacks itself!
It knocks itself out in confusion, just like the Groudon. This Venusaur also not helping, and Zapdos will roost up, 50% of its HP being returned to it here. So now it's up to this Kyogre with a single target Water Spout into the Grimmsnarl. It's not enough. Grimmsnarl just barely hangs on with the 15 health as the rain stops, and Austin is down to his final 2 Pokemon.
Light Screen finally wears off. You actually now do get Calyrex Shadow Rider out, but the thing is that Stefan had that critical Roost on Zapdos as well. Roost is, a more defensive move, and so this Zapdos set that Stefan has is really interesting because it's Eerie Impulse Roost with Thunderbolt and Hurricane as well, so it's a mix of offense and defense, and I think the Zapdos has really been the MVP so far. If you didn't have Roost there, then Calyrex can just Astral Barrage, pick up a knockout there, you get the Focus Action, then actually just have this Calyrex endgame that Austin is so good at setting up for, but now you're still dealing with the Assault Vest on Kyogre, and Astral Barrage here likely won't knock out Zapdos unless you get a critical hit for example. So at this point, the best bet might be to just hope for a critical hit onto the Zapdos and, you know, Grimmsnarl outspeeding Kyogre with the Spirit Break and pick up a double knockout. So if a crit doesn't happen, though, I think it's going to be tough.
At that point, you kind of feel justified, though, since you hit yourself in confusion so many times.
Absolutely.
You think, you know, I'm due for a crit at this point. I know it's only, you know, a couple % chance of happening, so you can't really count on it. But if it is, if Austin wants to move on to the finals, he is definitely going to have to see it. Zacian will switch into the Kyogre slot, getting the Kyogre able to set up the rain later on in the matchup, but also just wanted to have a little bit of a reset. Here is the Astral Barrage from Austin. It is a spread attack into the Zapdos. There's no light screen, and there's also no crit, so Zapdos hangs on.
Oh, Spirit Break into the Zapdos, though, and he gets the KO!
There it is. Zapdos actually goes down before attacking this turn. Zacian switched in, so there's no attack from that slot either.
Yeah, so the speed control with the scary face here playing such a big role, and, you know, I think, you know, from Stefan's end, you're worried about Astral Barrage, Spirit Break just knocking out your Kyogre, so you want to reset the speed drops there, right? So now it's Kyogre Zacian. Grimm is such low HP. That Zacian, however, critically can take an Astral Barrage. That first one did 87 damage, so it's bulky enough to take 2 Astral Barrages, and the Kyogre has the Assault Vest here, right? And so Stefan feels like he's still in a commanding position. Gets a little bit nerve-wracking when you have to add, like, Origin Pulse to the mix, right? So if you're Stefan, you feel safe clicking Origin Pulse. It's just going to be Psyshock onto Kyogre. Can this KO the Kyogre?
Hitting it off of its defensive stat,
so
and
close.
It's not enough. Kyogre hangs on. Behemoth Blade from the Zacian will be targeting down the Calyrex here, so it is at full health, but it'll be down to around, you know, 30% of its HP remaining. It's up to the Water Spout on the Kyogre. That's obviously going to be enough to take out Grimmsnarl. Not enough for the Calyrex, though. Calyrex hanging on with 26 HP, so you now have one more attempt this following turn. If you crit Zacian, you can get a game 3.
Exactly, and you know, Stefan, they're deciding for Water Spout over Origin Pulse, saying, I don't want to risk the miss. Their Origin Pulse's accuracy only, you know, 85% onto 1. It's so scary. So it's all about the critical hit. Can Calyrex crit into the Zacian?
We're going to find out. Kyogre goes down.
Oh,
Zacian does not. It hangs on. Stefan is going to retaliate with the Behemoth Blade into it. This Grim Neigh is not going to matter. Stefan will knock out this Calyrex, and Stefan Mott is moving on to the finals here in Indianapolis.
Congratulations to Stefan, and you have the feel for Austin there. I felt like he played an incredibly well game 2 with the adjustment, you know, realizing, okay, I'm going to go for the Dynamax Groudon instead, but unfortunately has a brutal